Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are cracking open a really powerful set of advanced academic vocabulary. We're talking about 50 high-impact words. A set designed not, for everyday chat, but really for boosting your ability to analyze, critique, and communicate complex stuff across different fields, too.
Exactly. And our mission here, for you listening, is about equipping you with some sophisticated language tools. This isn't just like a memorization drill. It's about synthesis, really. When you run into a challenging subject, say policy analysis or maybe an ethical debate, these words give you the precision you need. To move past just surface opinions and will conduct some real evidence-based thinking, they're kind of the scaffolding for becoming truly well-informed fast.
Mm-hmm. And just for context, this list we're looking at, it marks a pretty big milestone. It gets us through the 450th advanced word in the learning stack we've been working with. That's quite an incredible jump in language power we're unlocking here. Okay, so let's unpack this. We should probably organize these terms thematically, right? We'll start where all rigorous thinking really has to begin. The language of critical analysis, truth, and accountability.
Right. To do critical thinking effectively, you first need the words to examine things properly. So the first idea we need is scrutiny. That means careful, detailed, and sometimes, hostile examination.
I like that definition, often hostile. Scrutiny isn't just a casual glance, is it? It's really putting something under a microscope, like the source example. A new government policy, it only really faces public scrutiny after an independent audit brings out potential flaws. It's like the highest standard of looking at something we can apply.
And scrutiny often kicks off with skepticism. Being skeptical means you're having doubts, maybe reservations. It's a crucial starting point. When a scientist announces some revolutionary new discovery, the first reaction from others in the field, it's naturally skeptical. Well, until the methods and the results are rigorously tested anyway. Skepticism, it fuels that scrutiny process.
Okay, so once that process starts, we're heading towards proof. And this is where we need to distinguish between two words that sound similar but are distinct. Substantiate and validate.
Right. When you substantiate an argument, you're backing it up with concrete proof or evidence. You're basically answering, okay, does this claim actually hold water? You have to substantiate, say, your financial forecasts with strong, verifiable data.
Okay. And validate is a bit different then. It's more about confirming the truth or accuracy of something, maybe the method itself or the theory. Like new archaeological research might validate earlier findings about some lost civilization.
Exactly. Substantiation proves the specific point. Validation confirms the bigger picture, the legitimacy of the approach or the theory behind it.
Got it. Now, when we're communicating those findings, clarity is key. We want results that are tangible.
Yeah, tangible just means physical, concrete, solid. You're looking for results you can actually measure or see. If a charity project claims it's successful, you want to see tangible improvements in people's living standards.
Right.
Not just, good intentions.
And alongside tangible results, we usually demand transparent processes. Transparent meaning easy to see, open. A company needs transparent communication with its clients about fees or risks. If the process is murky, well, trust goes down and we start demanding more scrutiny.
So if that whole chain holds up, starting skeptical, applying scrutiny, substantiating with data, validating the methods, then the conclusion, it ought to be unequivocal, which means leaving absolutely no doubt. When the evidence is just definitive, the answer is unequivocal. It's interesting, those 7 words kind of define the whole arc, from initial doubt all the way to objective certainty.
That's a really powerful set of tools right there. But okay, once we've analyzed a situation, we need the language to describe its movement, its timing, its lifespan, I guess. Let's move to segment 2, words defining dynamics, stability, and change.
Okay, we need to understand how things are organized and how they operate over time.
Yeah.
Often we're dealing with systems that are sequential, meaning they're arranged in a logical or continuous order, like following a complex safety procedure. You have to take every step sequentially.
Right. And the opposite of sequential, which implies things are predictable, is sporadic. If something's sporadic, it just happens at irregular intervals. If a business only gets sporadic orders, well, that makes planning pretty much impossible. Or, like the example, power cuts being sporadic in rural areas, unpredictable, disruptive.
Timing also relates to duration. If something is transient, it only lasts for a short time. We often talk about transient populations in big cities, people moving through for seasonal work, short projects.
Yeah.
Their impact is, well, temporary.
And when intensity itself is transient, we watch it subside. That refers to things lessening or wearing off. We often hear it used physically, like floodwaters starting to subside after a big storm, or even emotionally, when initial panic starts to subside after a crisis is over.
Now let's look at threats to stability. There are two terms here that are really crucial for talking about political or organizational integrity: undermine and subvert. To undermine is to gradually weaken or damage something, often subtly, maybe even passively. Corruption, for example, can slowly undermine public confidence in government over time. There isn't always a big dramatic collapse.
Ah, I see. But subvert sounds much more aggressive.
Oh, absolutely. To subvert is to actively undermine the authority or stability of a system, often by attacking its core principles. It's the difference between neglect and outright attack.
Mhm.
Think about propaganda or systemic disinformation campaigns. They're designed to subvert democratic institutions by questioning the whole idea of elections or objective truth. You use subvert when the threat is deliberate, targeted, and fundamental.
Right, that's a key distinction. And the opposite of subversion is that constant effort to sustain something, to keep it going continuously. We talk about sustainable energy, right? Something that can sustain industrial growth, hopefully indefinitely.
And if that continuity fails,
Right.
or maybe there's a serious violation, we might have to terminate things, bring them to an end. A contract might get terminated immediately if someone doesn't comply with the terms. So these words, they really define the whole life cycle of systems, from starting up to facing disruption and maybe finally stopping.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, I think. Once we understand a system's motion, we need to add some texture to how we describe things. Segment 3 is all about words for describing characters, qualities, and intensity.
Let's start with mood and environment. Compare serene with turbulent. Serene is calm, peaceful, like an untouched national park landscape, offering a serene view.
hmm But not all places are peaceful, right? A market or even a whole political period can become turbulent, chaotic, unstable, marked by constant, strong change. When we use turbulent, we're not just saying unstable, we're implying something forceful, dynamic, maybe even dangerous.
And that same kind of contrast works for character, too. You have ruthless behavior showing no mercy, often linked with intense competition, the kind that forces companies to innovate just to survive.
And you contrast that with the presence of virtue. Things like honesty, moral excellence, which are seen as foundational in many societies. Political analysis often involves pitting ruthless ambition against, well, virtue-driven governance, doesn't it?
It does. We also use this kind of vocabulary for energy and action. A sedentary lifestyle,
hmm
involving very little physical activity, that often leads to health problems. It undermines long-term stability.
Compare that with being vigorous, strong, active, healthy. If you have a vigorous debate, it's not weak or half-hearted, it's energetic, forceful.
Right. And speaking of communication style, we use stern to describe a tone that's strict and serious, like a teacher giving a stern warning to students who are always late.
Okay, now for the finer details. If a writer uses subtle humor, it's delicate, it's fine, it's not obvious, you really have to pay attention to catch it. And the great irony is that often the most crucial underlying evidence for an argument can be quite subtle. It requires real scrutiny to uncover.
And we contrast that with vivid imagery. Vivid means strong, producing clear, striking pictures in your mind. An author uses vivid descriptions to make a landscape totally unforgettable. So the choice between subtle and vivid really defines the tone and the impact of what you're saying.
And connecting back to character, there's temperament, a person's basic natural character, which is absolutely vital for leadership roles, wouldn't you say? Especially in turbulent times. If someone has a timid temperament, lacking confidence or courage, they're probably less likely to lead effectively during a crisis.
Definitely. These words add that necessary depth to assessing character.
All right, let's shift gears now to our final segment, words for impact, resources, and organizational success. These are really key concepts for understanding economics and governance.
We can start with scope and impact. Unprecedented. If something's unprecedented, it means it's never been known, seen, or done before. This word is critical because it tells us history doesn't really offer a clear guide. Like the pandemic, it caused unprecedented global disruption, unprecedented policy challenges.
Right. And when facing unprecedented challenges, we often run into scarcity, the state of being in short supply. Scarcity of water or good farmland affects millions, particularly in arid regions. It demands innovative solutions.
And to fight scarcity and disruption, governments often try to introduce stimulus, something that encourages activity, interest, or growth. Tax cuts, maybe infrastructure spending, often act as a fiscal stimulus. The hope is to boost economic recovery after a downturn.
And the ultimate goal of that stimulus for an organization or an economy is to thrive, to grow or develop successfully, sometimes even when things are tough. Businesses tend to thrive when innovation is encouraged and they aren't bogged down by excessive or constantly changing regulations.
So how do we measure that success? We need to know if a proposal is viable. That means, is it capable of working successfully? Solar power, for instance, is increasingly seen as a viable long-term alternative to fossil fuels. Viability tells you the plan likely has a strong chance of technical and economic success.
And if that viable plan is also kind of a risky undertaking, we might call it a venture. Like a company's new venture into robotics might be viable, but it probably needs significant investment and carries substantial risk. Pretty much every major innovation starts as a venture, hoping to surpass existing standards.
Speaking of which, surpass just means to exceed expectations. A company that beats market growth forecasts has surpassed its goals. These metrics help measure the return on the risk you took with that venture.
And connecting this back to governance, success requires systems to uphold standards, to maintain and support them. Good legal systems have to uphold justice and fairness, even when facing, political turbulence or maybe internal attempts at subversion.
Exactly. And finally, just touching quickly on organizational structure. If someone is a subordinate, they're lower in rank or position. But good managers need to respect their contributions. And when a group is completely aligned, their decision is unanimous. Everyone involved agrees. These words help define those internal dynamics and how decisions get made. So there we have it. We've moved through concepts that define critical thinking rigor, the dynamics of time and change, the texture you get from nuanced description, and finally, the metrics of global economic impact. This whole stack of 450 words really gives you a framework to analyze the world with much, much greater precision than before.
So what does this all mean for you, listening? Well, you now possess the linguistic power to articulate complex ideas, to discuss whether a crisis is truly unprecedented or if a new strategy is actually viable. Using this language almost forces you into a more sophisticated level of analysis. The challenge now is really internalizing these words and actually using them when you talk about real-world issues.
Exactly. And maybe here's a final provocative thought for you to chew on. Consider the difference between an issue being seen as trivial, minor, unimportant, and merely being subtle, delicate, or not immediately obvious. Which of the subjects you care most about might risk being dismissed as trivial, just because the underlying evidence is actually quite subtle? Maybe start looking for those subtle signs that other people tend to miss.